What's going on today, YouTube? Rob here. In today's video, I'm going to be doing another deck profile for you, and this is my variant on Sacred Beasts, and this is only using 3 copies of the Sacred Beast structure deck. Before we get started, I just want to say, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing for more fun content, and maybe giving this video a like and a comment on what you might want to see next. Without wasting any more of your time, let's get into it. Alright guys, let's get into this triple Sacred Beast structure deck profile. First off, we're starting with Ravil, Lord of Phantasms, Shimmering Scraper. So this card cannot be normal summoned or set and must be special summoned from your hand by attributing 3 monsters. You can only use each of the following effects of Ravil, Lord of Phantasms, Shimmering Scraper once per turn. So, quick effect, you can discard this card and target 1 Ravil, Lord of Phantasms that you control from your... and for the rest of the turn, its attack becomes double its original attack. And also, it can attack monsters your opponent controls once each. If this card is in your graveyard, you contribute 1 monster and add this card to your hand. Next, we have 1 copy of Ravil, Lord of Phantasms. So this card cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand by attributing 3 fiend monsters. Each time your opponent normal summons a monster, special summon 1 Phantasm token, Fiend Dark level 1 with an attack of 1000 and a defense of 1000, but it cannot declare an attack. Once per turn, you contribute 1 monster, this card gains attack equal to the attributed monster's original attack until the end of this turn. Next, we have 1 copy of Hamon, Lord of Striking Thunder. This card cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand by sending 3 face-up continuous spell cards you control to the graveyard. If this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. While this card is in face-up defense position, monsters your opponent controls cannot target monsters for attacks except for this card. And lastly, for the Sacred Beasts, I have 1 copy of Uriah, Lord of Searing Flames. Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand by sending 3 face-up trap cards you control to the graveyard. This card gains 1000 attack for each continuous trap in your graveyard, and once per turn, you can target 1 set spell or trap card your opponent controls and destroy that target. Neither player can activate spell or trap card effects in response to this effect's activation. Next, for our monsters, we have 3 copies of Chaos Summoning Beast. You contribute this card and special summon 1 Uriah, Hamon, or Ravil from your hand, ignoring its summoning conditions. You can banish this card from your graveyard and add 1 Fallen Paradise from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Chaos Summoning Beast once per turn. This is a really good card to be able to get out your Sacred Beasts without having to tribute the monsters or spell or trap cards on your field, and is just a really good way to be able to go off into other combo plays. Next, we have 3 copies of Dark Beckoning Beast. When this card is normal summoned, you can add 1 Uriah, Hamon, or Ravil, or 1 card that specifically lists any of these cards' texts from your deck to your hand, except for Dark Beckoning Beast. You can only use the effect of Dark Beckoning Beast once per turn, and during your main phase, you can normal summon 1 Fiend monster with an attack and defense, with 0 attack and defense, in addition to your normal summon or set, and you can only gain this effect once per turn. Again, this is a good way to be able to kind of recycle or be able to go off into combos involving the Sacred Beasts. Then we have 3 copies of Dark Summoning Beast. You can tribute this card and special summon one of your Sacred Beasts from your hand or deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. Also, monsters you control cannot attack for the rest of this turn. You can only use this effect of Dark Summoning Beast once per turn, and you can banish this card from your graveyard and add one of your Sacred Beasts from your deck to your hand. Again, good for recycling and going into combos, and good to be able to get your main monsters onto your side of the field. Next, we have 2 copies of Grave Squirmer. If this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, target 1 card on the field and destroy that target. This is a good way to be able to get rid of some of your opponent's more troublesome cards, or just to be able to get rid of cards on the field in general. And I only have 2 because you don't really want to see this card all that often. It is a bit of a brick for the deck, so I have it at 2. Next, I have 1 copy of Tragodia. When you take battle damage, you can special summon this card from your hand and gain 600 attack and defense. This card gains 600 attack and defense for each card in your hand. And once per turn, you can add 1 monster from your hand. You can send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard, then target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls with the same level as the monster in your hand that was in your hand, and you take control of that face-up monster. Once per turn, you can target 1 monster in your graveyard, and this card's level becomes the same level as that target until the end of the turn. Again, only 1 copy because you don't really need to use the effect of Tragodia that much. Then we have 1 copy of Chaos Hunter. When your opponent special summons a monster, except during the damage step, you can discard 1 card and special summon this card from your hand, and your opponent cannot banish cards. Again, this is a good way to be able to get a high-level, high-attack monster on the field at low cost. Again, only why we're using 1, because it's kind of a brick, but other than that, it's got a decent effect. And lastly, for our monsters, we have 1 copy of Stygian Street Patrol. If this card destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you inflict damage to your opponent equal to the original level of that monster in the graveyard times 100. You can banish this card from your graveyard and special summon 1 fiend monster with 2,000 or less attack from your hand. This is a pretty good way to get monsters onto the field to go off into combo plays. So again, that's why we have it at 1. But we only have it at 1 because the downside is you have to be able to destroy your opponent's monster and send it to the graveyard. And that rounds off our monsters. Let's get on with the spell cards. So first we're starting off with 1 copy of Cerulean Skyfire. This is used to special summon Haman, Lord of Striking Thunder, using its own procedure. And you can also use face-down spells that you control. Once per turn, while this card you control... once per turn, while you control an attack position Haman, Lord of Striking Thunder, you can negate any spell or trap effect activated by your opponent. Then, change 1 Haman, Lord of Striking Thunder you control to defense position. And if a face-up Uriah, Haman, or Ravil you control leaves the field, you take no battle damage this turn. Again, you only need 1 for this. We only have the one copy of Haman in our deck anyway, so I find just play this card at 1. That's a really good extender. Next we have our 1 fusion card, which is Dimension Fusion Destruction. This card reads as follows: banish from your hand and or graveyard the fusion materials that are listed on a Phantasm fusion monster, then special summon that fusion monster from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. You take no battle damage from attacks involving the monster special summoned by this effect, and if you control Uriah, Haman, or Ravil, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation. Again, this is just a really good way to be able to get into your Arma tile and give your monsters a bit of protection. Then I have 1 copy of Terraforming. This lets you add 1 field spell from your deck to your hand. Pretty self-explanatory. This is for your Fallen Paradise. You could play this at 3, but I'm only playing it at 1 right now. Then we have 1 copy of The Beginning of the End. If you have 7 or more dark monsters in your graveyard, you can banish 5 dark monsters from your graveyard and draw 3 cards. This is just a good way to be able to draw into combo pieces and basically just to extend your plays. Other than that, you don't really need to see this card very much, so again, that's why this is at 1. Now, my next card is another draw card. It is Pot of Desires. This lets you banish 10 cards from the top of your deck face down, and you draw 2 cards. You can only activate 1 Pot of Desires per turn. Again, this is just for trying to draw into combo cards and play extenders, but you don't have to play this card in the deck for it to function. Pot of Desires is just an added card I thought I would throw in here to have draw power, like I said, for your combo pieces. Other than that, you don't really need to see that very much, so it's at 1. Then I have 3 copies of 1 for 1. This lets you send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard and special summon 1 level 1 monster from your hand or deck. This is a good way to get out your summoning beasts and go off into combos, and that's why I have it at 3, because you're maximizing all of your level 1 fiend beast monsters, essentially. You have 3 of each, so playing 3 copies of 1 for 1 is just a good way to go off into different combo variations. Next, for a bit of spell and trap removal, I have 3 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon, which allows you to target a spell or trap card on the field and destroy that target. It's pretty self-explanatory, just a good way to get rid of cards and interrupt your opponent. Then I have 3 copies of Opening of the Spirit Gates. This card is a must in this deck. And you want to see it as many times as possible, or as early as possible, which is why we're maximizing it at 3. So when this card is activated, you add 1 Uriah, Haman, or Ravil, or 1 monster that specifically lists this in its text from your deck to your hand. And once per turn, you can discard 1 card and special summon 1 fiend monster with 0 attack and defense from your graveyard. Once per turn, if you control a level 10 monster, you can add 1 continuous spell from your graveyard to your hand, and you can only activate 1 Opening of the Spirit Gates per turn. Again, this is a good recycler. This is a good card to go off into combos, and it's just a must for the deck, which is why I have it at 3. Lastly, for our spell cards, we have our field spell, Fallen Paradise. So your opponent cannot target Uriah, Haman, or Ravil, or Arma tile, the Chaos Phantasm, in your monster zones with card effects. Also, those monsters cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects while you control them. And if you control Uriah, Haman, or Ravil, or Armityle, in your monster zone, you can draw 2 cards, and if you can only use this effect of Fallen Paradise once per turn. Again, this is a good way to get extra cards and extend your plays, and it's a good way to have a bit of protection for your Sacred Beasts and other cards. That's it for the spells in the deck. Let's go off to the traps. So I have 1 copy of Hyperblaze. This is for your Uriah. So this is used to special summon Uriah using its own procedure, and you can also use face down spell or trap cards, trap cards that you control. Once per turn, when an attack is declared involving Uriah, you can send 1 trap from your hand or deck to the graveyard, and its attack and defense become the number of face-up traps on the field and in your graveyard times 1,000. For the rest of this turn, and once per turn, you can discard 1 card and add to your hand, or special summon 1 Uriah, Lord of Searing Flames, Haman, Lord of Striking Thunder, or Ravil, Lord of Phantasms from your graveyard, ignoring its summoning conditions. This is, again, a good way to add a bit of protection. It is a good way to beef up your Uriah's attack, and it is a good way to be able to special summon your Sacred Beasts without having to sacrifice any other cards. Next for our traps, we have 1 copy of Imperial Custom. Face-up continuous traps cannot be destroyed by battle or card effect except Imperial Custom, and you can only control 1 Imperial Custom. So again, this is just a good way to be able to give your trap cards immunity from being destroyed. I only have this at 1, but again, you can play this at 2 or 3, depending on how you want to play. Next, we have Dark Factory of More Production. This is another draw card. So you send 1 monster from your hand or field to the graveyard and draw 1 card. You can only use the effect of Dark Factory of More Production once per turn. This is why I only have it at 1, because you can only use it once per turn, and it is a continuous spell or a continuous trap card. So again, good for draw power, and it can be used to summon your Uriah. And lastly, for our traps, we have Awakening of the Sacred Beasts. So this card gains effects based on the number of Uriah, Haman, or Ravil with different names that you control. So if you have 1, then each time your opponent normal summons or special summons a monster, you gain life points equal to the attack of that monster or monsters. If you have 2, negate the activation and effects of monsters your opponent controls. And if you have 3, any monsters sent to your opponent's graveyard are banished instead. Once per turn, if you control a level 10 monster, you can add 1 continuous trap from your graveyard to your hand. So again, this is good for recycling and just extending your plays. You can play this at 3, but I find playing it at 2 is good enough. And that's it for the main deck. Let's go on to the extra deck. And for the extra deck, I only have the 1 copy of Armityle, the Chaos Phantasm. So this requires all 3 of your Sacred Beasts, Uriah, Haman, and Ravil. Must be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards, and once per turn, during your turn only, this card gains 10,000 attack and cannot be destroyed by battle. So again, once you get this guy out on the field, you're basically just going for game at that point. But yeah, I have him at 1, and he's the only guy I included in the extra deck. And that's it for this deck. Alright guys, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, be sure to leave a like and a comment. And if you're not already subscribed, consider subscribing to the channel for more fun Yu-Gi-Oh videos. I do have the Mutant deck profile coming up later this week, so stay tuned for that. And as always, I will see you in the next one. That's game.